The blood on Victoria Brennan's hands had long since washed away, but she could still see it every time she closed her eyes, dark and accusatory against her pale skin in the lamplight of a Denver brothel 3 years past. She stood now on the dusty main street of Watsonville, California, in the spring of 1878, watching the afternoon sun paint the distant hills gold and amber. The stagecoach had deposited her here 2 hours ago, with nothing but a worn carpetbag and a letter of introduction to Mrs. Henderson, who ran the boarding house on the edge of town. The air smelled of ocean salt, carried inland from Monterey Bay, mixed with horse sweat and the earthy scent of the agricultural fields that surrounded this small farming community. Victoria had chosen Watsonville specifically because it was quiet, respectable, and far enough from Colorado that her past might stay buried where it belonged. Mrs. Henderson had been kind when Victoria presented her letter, written by a minister in Sacramento who knew only that she was a woman seeking honest work and a fresh start. The boarding house keeper had shown her to a small but clean room on the second floor, with whitewashed walls and a window that overlooked the vegetable garden. The rent was reasonable, Mrs. Henderson explained, and there was a seamstress in town who might need help, as well as families who occasionally sought housekeepers or cooks. Victoria had thanked her with genuine gratitude, unpacked her few belongings, and then walked into town to familiarize herself with her new home. Watsonville was smaller than she had imagined, though the letter from the Sacramento minister had described it accurately enough. The main street held a general store, a blacksmith, a saloon called the Golden West, a church with a white steeple, and various other establishments that served the farming families who worked the fertile land of the Pajaro Valley. Apple orchards stretched in neat rows beyond the town limits, and Victoria had passed several wagon loads of produce heading toward the port in nearby Watsonville Landing. It was wholesome, pastoral, and exactly the kind of place where a woman like her had no business setting down roots. She was turning back toward the boarding house when she heard the commotion. A horse had broken loose from the hitching post outside the general store, spooked by something Victoria could not see. The animal, a handsome bay gelding, reared and plunged, scattering pedestrians and sending a young boy tumbling into the dirt. Without thinking, Victoria dropped her bag and ran forward, her practical gray skirt kicking up dust as she moved. She had grown up around horses on her father's farm in Missouri before everything had fallen apart, and the old instincts came back instantly. She approached the gelding from the side, speaking in a low, steady voice. "Easy now, easy. Nobody is going to hurt you." The horse's eyes rolled white with fear, but her calm tone seemed to reach through the panic. She kept talking, kept moving slowly until she was close enough to catch the trailing reins. The gelding tried to rear again, but she held firm, using her weight and positioning to bring the animal's head down. Within minutes, the horse was standing relatively still, sides heaving, but no longer attempting to bolt. "Well, I will be damned." Victoria looked up to see a man walking toward her from the general store, moving with the easy confidence of someone completely at home in his own skin. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing worn denim pants, a blue cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, and a brown leather vest. A hat shaded his face, but she could see sun-bronzed skin, a strong jaw, and eyes the color of creek water in summer. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with the weathered look of someone who spent his days working under the California sun. "That is my horse," he said, taking the reins from her hands. His fingers brushed hers briefly, calloused and warm. "I tied him secure, but something must have spooked him. I am grateful you stopped him before he hurt someone, or himself." "It was nothing," Victoria said, suddenly aware of how she must look, dusty and disheveled from her sprint down the street. "I just did what anyone would do. Most folks would have run the other direction." He was studying her with open curiosity, his gaze direct but not disrespectful. "You are new in town. I know everyone in Watsonville, and I have not seen you before. I arrived today. I am staying at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house." "Samuel Porter," he said, extending his hand. "I run a cattle ranch about 5 miles north of here. We also grow hay and some vegetables. Nothing fancy, but it keeps me and my men fed and working." Victoria Brennan. She shook his hand, noting the strength in his grip and the honesty in his eyes. This was a man who dealt plainly with the world, she thought, and something in her chest tightened with both longing and dread. Samuel Porter smiled at her, a slow, warm expression that transformed his weathered face. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Miss Brennan. If you're looking for work, I might know some folks who are hiring. What brings you to Watsonville?" "I am hoping to find employment as a seamstress or housekeeper," Victoria said carefully. "I have experience with both." Mrs. Calloway, who runs the dress shop, was just saying last week that she needed help with the spring orders. "I could introduce you if you like. I need to pick up some supplies here first, but I will be heading past her shop in about 20 minutes. Victoria knew she should decline politely, collect her bag, and return to the boarding house. Getting involved with anyone in this town, especially a man who looked at her with such open warmth, was a terrible idea. But she also knew that she needed work, and quickly, before her small savings ran out. "That would be very kind of you, Mr. Porter. Call me Samuel, or Sam if you prefer. We are not terribly formal out here." She found herself smiling despite her better judgment. "Samuel, then, and you may call me Victoria." He tied his horse more securely to the post, checking the knot twice, and then disappeared into the general store. Victoria retrieved her carpetbag and waited, watching the everyday life of Watsonville flow around her. A woman in a sunbonnet pushed a baby carriage past, nodding pleasantly. Two men argued good-naturedly outside the blacksmith's shop about the best way to repair a wagon axle. A dog slept in a patch of sunlight, its tail thumping occasionally against the wooden sidewalk. It was all so normal, so peaceful, and Victoria felt her throat tighten with the wish that she could truly belong here. Samuel emerged with a box of supplies balanced easily under one arm. "Ready?" he asked, and Victoria nodded. They walked together down the street, passing the church and the small schoolhouse where children's voices drifted through open windows. Samuel pointed out various landmarks, naming the families who lived in each house and what they did for a living. He clearly loved this town and its people, Victoria realized, and he spoke with the pride of someone deeply rooted in his community. "You grew up here?" she asked. "Born and raised. My father started the ranch when he came out from Texas in 1855, before I was born. He wanted land of his own, and California seemed like the place to find it. He bought 500 acres from a Spanish family that was selling off their holdings, and he built everything from the ground up. I was the oldest of 4 children, so I grew up knowing I would take over the place someday." His expression grew somber. "My parents died in 1874, influenza that swept through during a cold winter. My siblings all married and moved away to start their own families. So now it is just me and the ranch hands. I am sorry about your parents. Thank you. It was hard, but they built something good, and I am doing my best to honor that." He glanced at her. "What about you? Where are you from originally?" "Missouri," Victoria said, offering the truth because it was easier than inventing a complete fiction. "But I have lived in several places since then." She could see he wanted to ask more, but he was too polite to press. Instead, he led her to a neat building with a painted sign reading "Calloway's Fine Dresses and Alterations." The shop window displayed a lovely blue day dress with pearl buttons and delicate embroidery at the collar. Inside, the shop was bright and organized, with bolts of fabric lining the walls and a large cutting table in the center. A woman in her 40s looked up from her sewing machine, her face breaking into a smile when she saw Samuel. "Sam Porter, what brings you to town today?" "Had to pick up supplies, Mrs. Calloway, but I also wanted to introduce you to Miss Victoria Brennan. She just arrived in Watsonville, and she's looking for work. She mentioned experience in sewing." Mrs. Calloway set down her work and came around the table, assessing Victoria with the practiced eye of someone who knew fabric and fit. "Is that so? What kind of sewing have you done, Miss Brennan?" "I can do basic alterations, mending, and some dressmaking," Victoria said. "I have worked with cotton, wool, and silk. I can do embroidery and lacework as well." All of this was true, skills she had learned from her mother and later refined out of necessity, when honest work was the only barrier between herself and starvation. "Can you show me your hands?" Victoria extended her hands, palms up. Mrs. Calloway examined them, noting the small calluses from needlework and the neat short nails. Whatever she saw seemed to satisfy her, because she nodded. "I do need help, especially with the spring and summer orders. I can pay 25 cents a day, 6 days a week, 8 in the morning until 5 in the evening, with an hour for lunch. You would start with alterations and mending. And if your work is good, I will move you to dressmaking. How does that sound?" 25 cents a day was not much, but it would cover her rent with a little left over for food and necessities. Victoria felt relief wash through her. That sounds very fair. When would you like me to start? Tomorrow morning, if you are able. I will be here. Mrs. Calloway smiled. Good. I think we will work well together, Miss Brennan. Outside the shop, Samuel was waiting with his box of supplies. How did it go? I start tomorrow. Thank you for the introduction, Samuel. You have been very kind. It was my pleasure. He hesitated, as if debating whether to say something more. We have a community dance every month at the town hall. The next one is this Saturday evening. Would you like to go? I could introduce you to more people, help you get settled in Watsonville. Victoria knew she should say no. Getting close to anyone here was dangerous, especially someone like Samuel Porter, with his honest eyes and generous nature. But she was also so tired of being alone, of holding everyone at arm's length because of things that had happened when she was desperate and scared and had nowhere else to turn. I would like that, she heard herself say. Thank you. His smile was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. I will pick you up at 6 o'clock from Mrs. Henderson's, if that suits you. That suits me fine. She watched him walk back toward the general store to collect his horse, his stride easy and unhurried. Then she turned and made her way back to the boarding house, her heart beating faster than it should. This was a mistake, she told herself. Samuel Porter was exactly the kind of man she had no right to want. A good man who deserved someone without blood on her hands and shame in her past. But for just a moment, standing on that dusty street with the spring sunshine warm on her face, Victoria let herself imagine a different life, one where she could be the kind of woman a man like Samuel might love. The next 4 days passed in a blur of work and adjustment. Mrs. Calloway proved to be an exacting but fair employer, and Victoria threw herself into the alterations and mending with focused determination. She shortened hems, took in waists, repaired torn seams, and replaced buttons with the precision that came from years of practice. Mrs. Calloway watched her work for the first day, then nodded her approval and left her mostly alone after that. Victoria met other townspeople as they came into the shop to pick up orders or drop off new work. There was Mrs. Patterson, the doctor's wife, who wanted her Sunday dress let out because she was expecting her third child. Mr. Chen, who owned one of the vegetable farms outside town, brought in his son's torn work shirt and spoke in careful English about the weather and the crops. Young Sarah Miller, barely 18, came in blushing and excited with fabric for a wedding dress, and Victoria spent an entire afternoon pinning and measuring while Sarah chattered about her fiancé, a ranch hand named Thomas who worked for Samuel Porter. Mr. Porter is a good man to work for, Sarah said as Victoria marked the hem length. Thomas says he is fair and honest, treats his men right. He pays decent wages and he feeds them well. He even gave Thomas an extra week's pay when we got engaged, said it was to help us get started. She smiled dreamily. Thomas says Mr. Porter will probably marry someday soon himself. All the unmarried girls in town are hoping he will notice them. But he is so busy with the ranch that he hardly has time to court anyone properly. Victoria kept her face neutral, focusing on the pins and chalk marks. She had not seen Samuel since he had introduced her to Mrs. Calloway, though she had thought about him more than she cared to admit. Saturday evening and the dance felt both exciting and terrifying in equal measure. At night, alone in her room at the boarding house, Victoria tried to prepare herself for the inevitable moment when Samuel would learn the truth about her past. Because he would learn it, eventually. These things always came out. Someone from Denver or Sacramento would pass through Watsonville and recognize her, or she would let something slip. Some detail that would not fit the careful story she had built about being a simple farm girl from Missouri who had fallen on hard times. And when Samuel learned that Victoria Brennan had spent nearly 2 years working in a brothel, that she had sold her body to survive after her father drank himself to death and her mother died of heartbreak, that she had blood on her hands from the night a customer had tried to kill her, and she had fought back with a lamp that shattered his skull, he would look at her with disgust, and she would lose whatever fragile connection was building between them. She told herself she should leave Watsonville before that happened, save them both the pain. But she also desperately wanted just a little more time, a few more days of pretending she could be the kind of woman who belonged in a place like this. Saturday arrived with clear skies and a warm breeze that smelled of apple blossoms and fresh earth. Victoria spent the morning at the dress shop, finishing a rush order for Mrs. Patterson. Mrs. Calloway sent her home early, waving away Victoria's protests. You have been working hard all week, and you deserve an evening of fun. Besides, Sam Porter will be here at 6, and you need time to get ready." Back at the boarding house, Victoria washed her face and hands in the basin, then brushed out her long, dark hair until it shone. She had only 2 decent dresses, and she chose the better one, a simple green cotton with a white collar and cuffs that her mother had helped her make years ago, before everything fell apart. It was modest and practical, nothing fancy, but it fit her well, and the color brought out the hazel in her eyes. She pinched her cheeks for color and bit her lips to pinken them, then stood before the small mirror over the dresser, trying to see herself as Samuel might see her, a reasonably pretty woman in her middle 20s. Nothing special, but nothing offensive either. Ordinary, which was exactly what she needed to be. Samuel arrived precisely at 6, driving a small wagon rather than riding his horse. He wore clean denim pants and a white shirt that looked freshly laundered, with his brown leather vest and a black hat that he removed when Victoria answered the door. "You look lovely," he said simply, and the sincerity in his voice made her cheeks warm. "Thank you. You look very nice as well." He helped her up onto the wagon seat, his hand strong and steady under her elbow, and they set off toward the town hall. The evening air was cool but pleasant, and Victoria could hear music already drifting from the open windows of the hall as they approached. Lanterns had been strung outside, creating pools of golden light, and people were arriving in wagons and on foot, dressed in their Saturday best, and laughing with the easy camaraderie of neighbors who had known each other for years. Inside, the town hall had been transformed. The wooden floor had been swept and polished, chairs lined the walls, and a small group of musicians occupied one corner with a fiddle, a guitar, and an accordion. Tables along one wall held food contributions from various families: pies, cakes, bread, cheese, cold chicken, and pitchers of lemonade and cider. Children chased each other between the adults, shrieking with laughter, while older folks settled into chairs to watch the dancing and gossip. Samuel kept his promise to introduce Victoria around. She met the sheriff, a grizzled man named Henry Walsh, who had come to California during the gold rush and stayed when he realized farming was more reliable than mining. She met the schoolteacher, Miss Emma Foster, who was only a few years older than Victoria, and who welcomed her warmly. She met families with names like Sullivan and Martinez and Thompson, ranchers and farmers and shopkeepers, all of them friendly and curious about the new woman in town. When the music started in earnest, Samuel asked her to dance. Victoria hesitated, suddenly uncertain. "I am not a very good dancer." "Neither am I," Samuel said with a grin. "But everyone is too busy having fun to notice. Come on." He took her hand and led her onto the floor, where couples were forming up for a reel. The music was lively and fast, and Samuel was right. He was not a particularly skilled dancer, but he was enthusiastic and good-natured about his mistakes, laughing when he turned the wrong direction or stepped on her foot. Victoria found herself laughing too, caught up in the energy and joy of the moment. The music swept her along, and she stopped worrying about what people might think or discover. For this one evening, she let herself simply be a young woman at a dance with a kind man who made her feel safe. They danced 3 more reels, then took a break to catch their breath and sample the food. Samuel introduced her to his ranch hands, including young Thomas Miller, who looked nervous and proud in his clean clothes as he stood beside his beaming fiancée, Sarah. They danced again, a slower waltz this time, and Samuel pulled her closer, his hand warm against her back. Victoria could feel the solid strength of him, smell the clean scent of soap and sun-warmed cotton. When she looked up, he was watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. "I am glad you came to Watsonville," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the music. "So am I," Victoria answered, and in that moment, she meant it with her whole heart. They stayed until nearly 11, when the musicians finally packed up their instruments and families began gathering their sleepy children for the journey home. Samuel drove Victoria back to the boarding house, the wagon creaking companionably through the quiet streets. The moon was high and bright, painting everything in silver and shadow. At the boarding house door, Samuel walked her to the porch, his hat in his hands. "I had a wonderful time tonight, Victoria." "So did I. Thank you for taking me." He hesitated, and Victoria could see him working up his courage to say something. Finally, he spoke. "Would you like to have dinner at my ranch next Sunday? I am not the world's best cook, but I can manage a decent roast chicken, and I would like to show you the place. I am proud of what my father built, and I think you would enjoy seeing it." Every sensible part of Victoria screamed at her to decline, to keep her distance, to protect both of them from the inevitable hurt. But another part of her, the part that had been starved for kindness and genuine affection for so long, could not bear to say no. "I would like that very much." Samuel's smile was radiant. "I will pick you up after church, around 1 o'clock. That sounds perfect." He stood there for another moment, as if debating whether to kiss her, but then he simply touched his hat brim in a small salute and stepped back. "Good night, Victoria. Good night, Samuel." She watched him climb back into the wagon and drive away, the sound of the wheels fading into the night. Then she went inside and climbed the stairs to her room, her heart full of hope and dread in equal measure. The next week fell into a comfortable rhythm. Victoria worked at the dress shop, improving steadily under Mrs. Calloway's instruction until she was trusted with more complex alterations, and even some simple dressmaking. Samuel stopped by the shop twice during the week, ostensibly to pick up mended work shirts, but really, Victoria suspected, just to see her. They talked for a few minutes each time, easy conversation about the weather and the town and small details of their days. Mrs. Calloway watched these interactions with an approving smile, clearly pleased to see a match developing. On Sunday, Victoria attended church services at the white-steepled building on Main Street. The pastor, Reverend William Hayes, preached a sermon about forgiveness and second chances that made Victoria's eyes sting with unshed tears. After the service, Samuel found her on the church steps, and they walked together to where his wagon waited. The drive to his ranch took them north out of town, past cultivated fields and through rolling grassland dotted with cattle. The ranch house came into view after about 20 minutes, a solid 2-story structure built of wood with a wide front porch and several outbuildings scattered around it. Corrals held horses and cattle, and Victoria could see men working near the barn, tending to the Sunday chores that could not be postponed. "It is not fancy," Samuel said, suddenly sounding uncertain, "but it is home. It is beautiful," Victoria said honestly. The ranch had a well-tended, prosperous look, the buildings in good repair, and the land obviously cared for. "Your father built something remarkable." Samuel helped her down from the wagon, and his hand lingered on hers for a moment longer than necessary. "Come inside. I will show you around." The house was comfortable and masculine, with sturdy furniture and practical decorations. The main room held a stone fireplace, a worn sofa, several chairs, and shelves lined with books. The kitchen was spacious, with a big wood-burning stove and a table that could seat 8. Upstairs, Samuel showed her 3 bedrooms, all furnished but clearly unused except for the master bedroom that had been his parents' and was now his. Everything was neat and clean, if a bit dusty, and Victoria could see the evidence of Samuel's solitary life in the bachelor's simplicity of it all. "I have a woman from town who comes once a week to clean and do laundry," Samuel explained. "Mrs. Rodriguez, you might have met her at the dance. Her husband works for me, and the extra money helps their family, but the place could use a woman's touch full-time." He said this casually, but Victoria heard the loneliness underneath the words. They returned to the kitchen, where Samuel had a chicken already roasting in the oven. He had prepared potatoes and carrots to go with it, and there was fresh bread from the bakery in town. While the meal finished cooking, they sat on the front porch and watched the sun begin its descent toward the western hills. Samuel talked about the ranch, the challenges of managing cattle and crops and men, the satisfaction of seeing things grow and thrive under his care. Victoria talked carefully about her childhood in Missouri, her father's farm, her mother's garden, all the good memories from before everything went wrong. "What brought you to California?" Samuel asked eventually, the question she had been dreading. Victoria chose her words carefully. "My parents died, and I had no family left in Missouri. I needed to make a new start somewhere, and California seemed like a place where that was possible." "It is a good place for new beginnings," Samuel agreed. "That is why my father came here, and why so many others have come over the years. The past does not matter as much here. What matters is what you are willing to build going forward." Victoria wanted desperately to believe that, but she knew it was not entirely true. The past always mattered, especially for a woman. A man could have a checkered history and be forgiven, even admired for overcoming it. But a woman, especially one who had done what Victoria had done, would always be judged, always be marked as fallen and unworthy of respect. The meal was simple but good, and they ate at the kitchen table while the evening light faded outside. Samuel told stories about growing up on the ranch, about his siblings and his parents, about the various disasters and triumphs that had marked his years. Victoria found herself laughing genuinely, relaxing in a way she had not allowed herself to do in years. Samuel had a gift for storytelling, and he clearly loved the life he had built here. After dinner, as Victoria helped him wash the dishes, Samuel said quietly, "I really enjoy spending time with you, Victoria. I hope you feel the same way." Her hands stilled in the wash water. "I do feel the same way," she said carefully. "But Samuel, there are things about my past that you do not know, things that might change how you feel about me." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "We all have things in our past we are not proud of, Victoria. I am not asking you to tell me your whole life story right now. I am just saying that I like you and I would like to keep seeing you, if you are willing. Even if my past is worse than you imagine, I do not care about your past. I care about who you are now and who you might become." He reached out and gently took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "You are kind and hard-working and brave. I saw that the first day we met, when you stopped my horse from hurting someone. Whatever happened before you came to Watsonville, it brought you here, and I am grateful for that." Victoria felt tears pricking her eyes. She wanted so badly to believe him, to trust that his feelings would not change when he learned the truth. But she also knew she was falling in love with him, and the thought of losing him once he knew everything was almost unbearable. "You are a good man, Samuel Porter." "I am just a man, same as any other, but I am a man who knows a good thing when he sees it, and I see it in you." He drove her back to town in the gathering darkness, and this time, when he walked her to the boarding house door, he did kiss her. It was gentle and sweet, his lips warm against hers, his hand cupping her cheek with infinite tenderness. Victoria melted into it, letting herself feel the full force of her growing affection for this kind, steady man who made her feel safe and valued. "I will see you soon," Samuel murmured against her hair, and Victoria nodded, not trusting her voice. The weeks that followed were the happiest Victoria had known in years. She continued working at the dress shop, where Mrs. Calloway increased her responsibilities and her pay. She attended church on Sundays and then spent the afternoons at Samuel's ranch, helping him prepare meals and sometimes riding out with him to check on the cattle. She was a good rider, another skill from her childhood, and Samuel seemed pleased to have company during the long rides across his property. They fell into an easy courtship, spending time together whenever Samuel's work and Victoria's schedule allowed. He took her on picnics by the Pajaro River, where they waded in the shallows and talked about everything and nothing. He taught her to shoot a rifle, patient and encouraging, as she learned to handle the weapon. She mended his clothes and occasionally cooked dinner at the ranch, delighting in the domestic intimacy of it. They went to another community dance, and this time, Victoria felt truly part of the town, greeted warmly by people she now considered friends. Samuel kissed her often now, growing bolder as the weeks passed. Victoria responded with a passion that surprised her, having thought that her experiences in Denver had killed any capacity for genuine desire. But Samuel's touch was nothing like the grasping hands of customers who had paid for access to her body. Samuel touched her with reverence, with tenderness, as if she were precious and worthy of care. It awakened something in her that she had thought long dead. But always in the back of her mind was the knowledge that this happiness was built on a foundation of secrets. Samuel thought he was courting a simple woman with a sad past, not a former prostitute who had killed a man in self-defense. The longer she waited to tell him the truth, the worse the eventual revelation would be. But she was a coward, she realized, too desperate for this taste of normal life to give it up before she absolutely had to. The crisis came in late August, 4 months after Victoria had arrived in Watsonville. She was working at the dress shop when the door opened and a man walked in, dusty from travel and looking for directions to the sheriff's office. Victoria glanced up from her sewing and felt the blood drain from her face. She knew this man. His name was Frank Garrison, and he had been a regular customer at the brothel in Denver, where she had worked. He had been there the night Victoria killed Jack Sullivan in self-defense, and he had testified at the inquest that followed. Frank's eyes widened with recognition. Victoria Brennan, I thought you disappeared after the trial. Mrs. Calloway looked up with interest. You two know each other? We met in Denver, Victoria said carefully, her heart pounding so hard she felt dizzy. It has been a long time, Frank. Few years, Frank agreed. He was staring at her with open curiosity. "You are a long way from Colorado. What brings you to California?" "I live here now. I work for Mrs. Calloway." "Huh. Small world." Frank shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "Look, I am just passing through. I am on my way to San Francisco to start a new job. I will not tell anyone I saw you, if that is what you are worried about. What happened in Denver, that was not your fault. Everyone knew Jack Sullivan was a mean drunk, and you did what you had to do to survive. The law cleared you of any wrongdoing. But the damage was already done." Mrs. Calloway's expression had shifted from friendly curiosity to sharp interest. "What happened in Denver, Miss Brennan?" Victoria's mouth went dry. She could lie, try to deflect, but Frank's presence made that impossible. "It is a long story, Mrs. Calloway." Frank, realizing he had stepped into something awkward, touched his hat brim. "I will be going. Good to see you are doing well, Victoria." He left quickly, the door swinging shut behind him. Mrs. Calloway set down her sewing. "Miss Brennan, I think you had better tell me what that man was talking about." Victoria's hands were shaking. She set down her own work before she stabbed herself with the needle. 3 years ago, I was working in a brothel in Denver. One of the customers attacked me, tried to strangle me because I refused to do something he wanted. I defended myself with an oil lamp. He died from the head injury. There was an inquest, and I was cleared of any criminal charges because multiple witnesses testified that he attacked me first and I was fighting for my life. Afterward, I left Denver and eventually made my way here. The silence in the shop was deafening. Mrs. Calloway's face had gone very still and cold. "You were a prostitute?" "Yes." There was no point in denying it now. "After my parents died, I had no money and no way to support myself. I did what I had to do to survive. I am not proud of it, but I am not going to apologize for staying alive. You lied to me. You let me believe you were a respectable woman." "I never lied to you," Victoria said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I told you I had experience sewing and that I needed work. Everything I told you about my skills was true. But you left out the most important part. You let me welcome you into my shop, introduce you to my customers, without telling me the truth about what you were." "Mrs." Calloway stood up, her face flushed with anger. "I cannot have a woman of your reputation working here, Miss Brennan. It would destroy my business if people found out. I am sorry, but I have to let you go." Victoria had known this would happen, but the reality of it still felt like a physical blow. "I understand. I will collect my things." She gathered her few personal items from the small space where she kept them, her hands still shaking. Mrs. Calloway watched in stony silence, and Victoria could see the other woman struggling between compassion and self-preservation. In the end, self-preservation won, as it almost always did. Outside, Victoria walked blindly back toward the boarding house, her mind racing. Frank would not deliberately spread the story, she believed that. But in a town this small, secrets did not stay secret for long. Mrs. Calloway would tell her husband, who would tell others, and within days everyone in Watsonville would know that Victoria Brennan was a fallen woman. She would lose her room at the boarding house. She would be shunned by the people who had been kind to her. And worst of all, Samuel would find out. And he would look at her with disgust and disappointment. She could leave town before that happened. Pack her carpet bag and take the next stagecoach out. Disappear before Samuel learned the truth. It would be cleaner that way, easier for both of them. But even as she thought it, Victoria knew she could not do it. She had spent too long running, too long hiding. Samuel deserved to hear the truth from her, not from town gossip. And if he rejected her after that, at least she would know she had been honest with him at the end. She returned to the boarding house and changed into her other dress, the simple gray one she had worn the day she arrived. Then she borrowed a horse from the livery, promising to return it by evening, and rode out to Samuel's ranch. The afternoon sun was hot on her shoulders, and the familiar landscape blurred with her unshed tears. She rehearsed what she would say, trying to find words that would make Samuel understand, without making excuses for herself. The ranch was quiet when she arrived, most of the hands out working the far pastures. Samuel was in the barn, mucking out stalls, and he looked up with surprise and pleasure when Victoria appeared in the doorway. "This is an unexpected visit, not that I am complaining." Then he saw her face, and his smile faded. "What is wrong?" "I need to talk to you," Victoria said. "It is important." He set aside his pitchfork immediately and led her to the house, settling her on the porch where the shade and breeze would be more comfortable. "Tell me what happened." Victoria took a deep breath and then told him everything. She told him about her father's drinking and debts, about her mother's death from a broken heart, about being alone and penniless at 22 with no family and no prospects. She told him about the brothel in Denver, about the 2 years she spent selling her body to survive, about the night Jack Sullivan tried to kill her, and she fought back with the only weapon at hand. She told him about the inquest and the months of hiding afterward, terrified that Sullivan's friends would come for revenge. She told him about the long journey to California and the desperate hope that she could start over in a place where no one knew her past. "A man from Denver came into the dress shop today," she finished. "He recognized me and said enough that Mrs. Calloway figured out the rest. She dismissed me from her employment. By tomorrow, everyone in Watsonville will know what I was. I wanted you to hear it from me first, before someone else told you." Samuel had listened to all of this in silence, his face unreadable. Now he leaned back in his chair and stared out at the corrals, his jaw working. Victoria waited, her heart breaking with every second of silence. Finally he spoke. "You killed a man in self-defense." "Yes." "And you were cleared of any wrongdoing by the law." "Yes." "But you worked as a prostitute for 2 years." Victoria flinched at the bluntness of it. "Yes. I did what I had to do to survive. I am not asking you to forgive me or understand it. I am just telling you the truth." "Why did you wait so long to tell me?" "Because I am a coward," Victoria said, her voice breaking. "Because I was happy for the first time in years, and I did not want to lose that. Because I knew that once you knew the truth, you would look at me differently, and I could not bear that." Samuel turned to face her, and she braced herself for the disgust and rejection she knew was coming. But his expression was not what she expected. He looked troubled and sad, but not disgusted. "What do you think of yourself, Victoria? Do you think you are worthless because of what you did to survive?" "I think I am stained," Victoria whispered. "I think I am not pure enough for a good man like you. I think you deserve someone better, someone who has not done the things I have done." "And what if I think differently?" She stared at him, not understanding. "What?" Samuel stood up and moved to crouch in front of her chair, taking her hands in his. "Victoria, listen to me. What happened to you was not your fault. You were put in an impossible situation, and you did what you had to do to stay alive. That does not make you worthless or stained. That makes you a survivor. But I sold my body. I let men use me for money. You made a choice between survival and death. And you chose survival. I do not blame you for that. I do not think less of you for that." His grip on her hands tightened. "Do you think less of yourself?" "Every day," Victoria said, the tears finally spilling over. "Every single day I hate myself for what I did. I feel dirty and ashamed, and I do not think I will ever feel clean again." "Then I will wash the past with my hands," Samuel said firmly. "I will help you wash away all that shame and pain. I will show you every day that you are worthy of love and respect, that your past does not define your future, if you will let me." Victoria could not breathe. "You cannot mean that. You cannot want me, knowing what you know now." "I do want you. I want you more than I have ever wanted anyone." Samuel reached up and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks. "I love you, Victoria. I think I started loving you the first day we met, when you were brave enough to stop a spooked horse when everyone else ran away. And nothing you have told me today changes that. But the town will know. They will judge me. They will judge you for being with me." "Let them judge," Samuel said with sudden fierceness. "I do not care what anyone else thinks. I care about you, about us. If people in this town cannot accept that I love you and want to marry you, then that is their problem, not ours." Victoria's breath caught. "Marry me?" "Yes, marry me. I was working up the courage to propose anyway, but now seems like the right time." He was still kneeling in front of her, his hands warm and steady around hers. "Marry me, Victoria. Let me spend the rest of my life showing you that you are worthy of love, that your past does not matter, that you can have a good future here with me." "Samuel, you are not thinking clearly. Once the town knows, you will be shunned too. Your business will suffer. People will not want to associate with you." "Then we will find new people to associate with," Samuel said stubbornly. "Victoria, I have spent my whole life doing what was expected of me, being the good son, the responsible rancher, the upstanding citizen, and I have been content with that. But now I have found someone I love, someone who makes me happy in a way I never knew was possible. I am not giving that up because of small-minded gossip. I am not giving you up." Victoria was crying in earnest now, great gasping sobs that shook her whole body. Samuel pulled her down from the chair and into his arms, holding her tightly while she wept against his chest. He murmured soothing nonsense, his hand stroking her hair, and gradually Victoria's tears subsided into hiccuping breaths. "I love you too," she whispered against his shirt. "I love you so much, and I have been so afraid of losing you." "You are not going to lose me," Samuel promised. "We are in this together now, for better or worse. Say yes, Victoria. Say you will marry me." She pulled back enough to look at him, at this good, kind man who was offering her everything she had thought she could never have. "Yes," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Victoria clung to him, pouring all her fear and hope and love into the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Samuel was grinning. "We should go into town and tell Reverend Hayes. The sooner we are married, the sooner we can stop worrying about what anyone else thinks." "Are you sure about this?" Victoria asked one more time. "Absolutely certain?" "I have never been more certain of anything in my life," Samuel said. "You are mine, Victoria Brennan, and I am yours, and nothing in heaven or on earth is going to change that." They rode back to Watsonville together, Samuel on his horse and Victoria on the borrowed mare. By the time they arrived, the news of Victoria's past had already spread, just as she had feared. People stared as they rode down Main Street, some with curiosity, others with open hostility. "Mrs. Henderson met them at the boarding house door, her expression apologetic but firm. "I am sorry, Miss Brennan, but I cannot have you staying here any longer. It would not be proper, given what I have learned about your past." "That is fine, Mrs. Henderson," Samuel said before Victoria could respond. "Miss Brennan will be staying at my ranch from now on. We are getting married as soon as possible." Mrs. Henderson's eyes widened. "Mr. Porter, surely you have not thought this through. People are saying that Miss Brennan was a prostitute in Denver." "I know exactly what people are saying, and I do not care," Samuel said calmly. "Victoria is going to be my wife, and anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly." Victoria collected her few belongings from her room while Samuel waited, ignoring the whispers and stares of the other boarders. Then they walked together to the church, where Reverend Hayes was in his small office preparing Sunday's sermon. The Reverend looked up when they entered, his expression troubled. "Mr. Porter, Miss Brennan, I suppose you have heard the talk going around town." "We have," Samuel said, "and we are here to arrange a wedding. Can you marry us, Reverend?" Reverend Hayes set down his pen and studied them both carefully. "Mr. Porter, I feel obligated to counsel caution. Miss Brennan's past is now public knowledge, and marrying her will bring judgment upon you as well. Have you truly considered the consequences?" "I have considered everything that matters," Samuel said. "I love Victoria, and she loves me. We want to build a life together. Isn't that what marriage is supposed to be about?" "Marriage is also about the sanctity of the union, about entering into it with pure hearts and clean consciences. Then it is a good thing that God forgives sins and offers second chances," Victoria said quietly. She had been letting Samuel speak for her, but now she stepped forward. "Reverend Hayes, I am not going to pretend that my past does not exist, or that I am not ashamed of things I did to survive. But I am also not going to let that past destroy my chance at a good future. Samuel knows everything about me, and he still wants to marry me. Are you going to deny us that?" The Reverend was silent for a long moment, his gaze moving between them. Finally he sighed. "You are right. It is not my place to judge, only to guide. And if Mr. Porter is certain about this, then I will perform the ceremony. But I warn you both, the path ahead will not be easy. There are people in this town who will not accept this marriage." "Then we will deal with those people as we need to," Samuel said. "When can you marry us?" "I will need to post the banns for 3 weeks, as is customary." "Can we skip the banns?" Victoria asked. "I understand they are traditional, but given the circumstances, I do not think waiting 3 weeks will make things any easier." Reverend Hayes considered this. "I can waive the banns in special circumstances." "Very well. If you are both absolutely certain, I can marry you this Saturday. That will give you a few days to prepare, and it will be soon enough to quiet some of the worst gossip." "Saturday is perfect," Samuel said. "Thank you, Reverend." They left the church and walked to the general store, where Samuel needed to pick up supplies. The store owner, Mr. Patterson, served them with visible reluctance, his disapproval clear in every stiff movement. Other customers stared and whispered, and one woman deliberately turned her back when Victoria tried to greet her. It was humiliating and painful, but Samuel kept his hand on Victoria's back, a solid presence of support, and she drew strength from that. At the livery, where Victoria returned the borrowed horse, the owner refused to look at her directly. "I would appreciate it if you did not borrow from me again, miss," he said curtly. Victoria nodded and left quickly, her cheeks burning with shame. Samuel drove her to the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. "You can stay in one of the spare bedrooms until we are married," he said. "I know it is not ideal, but I want to do this properly. I want everyone to know that I respect you and that our marriage is legitimate." "Thank you," Victoria said softly. She was exhausted from the emotional upheaval of the day, but also strangely peaceful. The worst had happened, the secret was out, and Samuel had not abandoned her. He had chosen her, claimed her publicly, and promised to stand by her. It was more than she had ever dared to hope for. Over the next few days, Victoria settled into life at the ranch. She cooked for Samuel and his hands, cleaned the house, and helped with small chores around the property. The ranch hands had heard the gossip, of course, but Samuel made it clear that anyone who disrespected Victoria would be fired immediately. Most of the men were decent enough to keep their opinions to themselves, and a few, like young Thomas Miller, were openly supportive. "Sarah and I think it is wonderful that you and Mr. Porter are getting married," Thomas said one morning while Victoria served breakfast. "Sarah says anyone who judges you for surviving hard times is a hypocrite, because we have all done things we are not proud of." "Thank you, Thomas. That means a great deal." Samuel worked alongside his men during the days but spent the evenings with Victoria, talking and planning their future together. They discussed how to run the ranch, how to handle the inevitable social ostracism, how to build a life that would be satisfying and meaningful despite the judgment of others. "I want you to know that you do not have to change anything about yourself to please me or anyone else," Samuel said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the stars come out. "You are exactly who you were supposed to be, and I love all of you, past included. Even the parts that are stained and broken." "There are no stained or broken parts," Samuel said firmly. "There are only parts that have survived terrible things and come out stronger. You are the bravest woman I have ever met, Victoria. Do not ever forget that." She leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling safe and cherished in a way she never had before. "I am going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you. You already are worthy of me, but I am going to spend the rest of my life proving that to you." Saturday arrived with perfect weather, sunny and warm with a gentle breeze. Victoria wore her green dress, the one she had worn to the first dance with Samuel, and pinned her hair up with a simple comb. Samuel wore his best suit, looking handsome and nervous as he waited for her in the church. The ceremony was small and quiet. Reverend Hayes performed the service, with Thomas Miller and his fiancée Sarah serving as witnesses. A few other people attended, friends of Samuel's who were willing to overlook Victoria's past, but the church was mostly empty. Victoria tried not to let that hurt, focusing instead on Samuel's face as he repeated his vows, his voice strong and sure. "I, Samuel James Porter, take you, Victoria Ann Brennan, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love, honor, and cherish you in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as we both shall live." Victoria's voice shook as she repeated her own vows, but she meant every word. "I, Victoria Ann Brennan, take you, Samuel James Porter, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love, honor, and cherish you in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as we both shall live." Reverend Hayes blessed their union and pronounced them husband and wife. "You may kiss your bride, Mr. Porter." Samuel kissed her gently, sweetly, and Victoria felt tears of joy spill down her cheeks. When they pulled apart, he was smiling. "Hello, Mrs. Porter." "Hello, Mr. Porter." They signed the marriage register, and then Samuel took her hand and led her out of the church. A small group of well-wishers had gathered outside, including several of Samuel's ranch hands and a few townspeople who had decided to support the match. They threw rice and called out congratulations as Samuel helped Victoria into the wagon for the drive back to the ranch. That night, in the privacy of Samuel's bedroom, which was now their bedroom, Victoria's nervousness returned. Samuel sensed it immediately and moved slowly, gently, taking his time to reassure her with soft words and tender touches. "We do not have to do anything you are not ready for," he murmured, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I can wait as long as you need." "I want to," Victoria said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want to be your wife in every way. I am just afraid that I will not be able to enjoy it after everything that happened in Denver." "Then we will take it slow," Samuel promised. "And if at any point you want to stop, we will stop. This is about us, about our love for each other, not about anything that happened in your past." He was patient and gentle, and to Victoria's amazement and relief, her body responded to him with genuine desire. This was nothing like the mechanical transactions of the brothel. This was making love with someone who cared about her pleasure as much as his own, someone who touched her with reverence rather than entitlement. When it was over, Victoria lay in Samuel's arms and cried, but this time the tears were of healing, of release, of the profound relief of being truly loved. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "Thank you for making me feel clean again." "You were always clean," Samuel murmured into her hair. "I am just glad I could help you see it." The months that followed were not easy. Many people in Watsonville continued to shun Victoria, crossing the street to avoid her or pointedly ignoring her presence at church. Some of Samuel's business associates were less willing to work with him, and a few families pulled their children away when Victoria walked past. It hurt, and there were days when Victoria wondered if she should leave, should spare Samuel the social consequences of his choice. But Samuel never wavered. He stood by her publicly and privately, making it clear that anyone who wanted to do business with him would have to accept his wife. Gradually, grudgingly, some people began to soften. Mrs. Calloway never apologized, but she nodded to Victoria on the street one day, a small acknowledgement that was still more than nothing. Sarah Miller and her husband Thomas remained loyal friends, often visiting the ranch for Sunday dinners. A few other young couples, less bound by the rigid judgments of their elders, also reached out in friendship. Victoria threw herself into being a good wife and partner. She managed the household with efficiency, kept the books for the ranch, and even helped with some of the outdoor work when extra hands were needed. She planted a vegetable garden behind the house, just like her mother had done years ago in Missouri, and took deep satisfaction in watching things grow. She learned to cook Samuel's favorite meals and mended clothes for him and the ranch hands. She made the house into a true home, warm and welcoming, a place where Samuel could rest after long days of hard work. And slowly, painfully, she began to heal. The shame that had weighed on her for years started to lift, replaced by a tentative sense of self-worth. Samuel's love and acceptance gave her the strength to forgive herself, to see her survival not as a mark of dishonor, but as proof of her resilience. She would never forget her past, but she learned to live with it, to integrate it into her story without letting it define her entirely. In the spring of 1879, nearly a year after their wedding, Victoria realized she was pregnant. She told Samuel one evening after dinner, watching his face carefully for his reaction. His eyes lit up with joy and wonder. "Truly? We are going to have a baby?" "Yes. I think I am about 3 months along. The baby should arrive in the fall." Samuel swept her into his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests to be careful. "This is the best news. We are going to be parents, Victoria. Can you believe it?" "I can hardly believe any of this is real," Victoria admitted. "A year ago, I thought I would spend the rest of my life alone, marked by my past. And now I have you, and this ranch, and a baby on the way. It feels like a dream." "It is not a dream. It is real. And it is ours." Samuel placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Our child. A new life, a new beginning." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Victoria bloomed with health and happiness. Samuel was attentive and protective, insisting that she rest more and work less. The ranch hands were equally solicitous, and Victoria found herself touched by their kindness. Even some of the townspeople began to thaw, perhaps seeing the visible evidence of the Porters' respectable married life and softening their judgments. In October of 1879, Victoria went into labor on a crisp autumn morning. The midwife, Mrs. Chen, attended her through the long hours of labor, while Samuel paced anxiously downstairs. Finally, as the sun was setting, Victoria gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Samuel rushed upstairs the moment he was allowed and stood at the bedside, staring down at his son with awe and tenderness. "He is perfect," Samuel breathed. "Absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" "I was thinking about your father," Victoria said, exhausted but happy. "James, after his grandfather, James Samuel Porter." "James," Samuel repeated, testing the name. "I love it. Hello, James. I am your father, and this is your mother, and we are going to love you so much." Victoria cradled her son against her chest, feeling a fierce protective love surge through her. This child would never know hunger or desperation. This child would grow up safe and loved, with two parents who would do anything to protect him. This child was proof that she had truly washed away her past and built a new life. Over the next few years, the Porter family grew and thrived. James was followed by a daughter, Rose, born in 1881, and then another son, William, born in 1883. The ranch prospered under Samuel's careful management, and Victoria proved to be an excellent partner in all aspects of the business. She managed the household accounts, negotiated with suppliers, and even helped make decisions about which crops to plant and which cattle to sell. The townspeople of Watsonville gradually accepted the Porters as respectable members of the community. Victoria's patience, kindness, and obvious devotion to her family slowly wore down even the most stubborn critics. By 1885, she was invited to join the Church Ladies' Auxiliary, a clear sign that she had been fully rehabilitated in the eyes of the community. She accepted the invitation graciously, not because she needed their approval, but because she wanted to participate in the life of the town that had become her home. Samuel never let her forget that she was loved and valued. He told her often how proud he was of her, how grateful he was for their life together. He kept his promise to wash away her past, not by pretending it had never happened, but by helping her see that it did not define her present or her future. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1888, Samuel gave Victoria a locket engraved with their initials and the date of their marriage. Inside were tiny photographs of their 3 children, solemn-faced and beautiful in their Sunday best. 10 years, Samuel said as he fastened the locket around her neck. "The best 10 years of my life." "Mine too," Victoria said, tears of happiness in her eyes. "You saved me, Samuel. You gave me a life I never thought I could have." "We saved each other," Samuel corrected. "You made me understand what it means to love someone unconditionally, to see past the surface to the person underneath. You made me a better man, Victoria." They stood on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sun set over the land they had built together. Their children played in the yard, James teaching his younger siblings how to rope a wooden post, Rose's laughter ringing out clear and bright. It was an ordinary evening, peaceful and domestic, and yet Victoria felt profound gratitude for every moment of it. She thought sometimes about the girl she had been in Denver, desperate and afraid, doing whatever it took to survive. She thought about the woman she had been when she arrived in Watsonville, convinced that she was too stained and broken to deserve love or happiness. And she looked at the woman she had become, a wife and mother, respected in her community, secure in the knowledge that she was valued and loved. Samuel had kept his promise. He had washed away her past with his hands, his love, his unwavering belief in her worth. And in doing so, he had given her the greatest gift of all, the freedom to forgive herself and embrace the future without shame. By 1895, the Porter Ranch had become one of the most successful in the region. James, now 16, was already taking on significant responsibilities, learning from his father how to manage the land and the business. Rose, at 14, was bright and spirited, with her mother's determination and her father's easy charm. William, at 12, showed a gift for working with horses that made his father proud. Victoria was 41 years old, and her dark hair was now streaked with silver. Her hands bore the calluses of years of hard work, but her eyes held a peace and contentment that would have seemed impossible to her younger self. She and Samuel had weathered storms together, both literal and figurative. They had faced drought and disease, market downturns, and difficult winters. They had nursed each other through illnesses and supported each other through losses, including the death of Mrs. Henderson and Reverend Hayes, both of whom had lived long enough to see the Porters become pillars of the community. On a warm spring evening in 1895, the Porter family gathered on the porch for dinner, a tradition that Victoria had insisted on maintaining, even as the children grew older and busier. They talked about their days, shared news from town, and made plans for the coming week. After the meal, as the children cleared the dishes and headed inside to their evening chores, Samuel took Victoria's hand and led her out to the garden. The apple trees were in full bloom, their white blossoms glowing in the twilight like fallen stars. Samuel and Victoria walked slowly among the trees, their hands clasped, comfortable in the silence that came from years of companionship. "Do you remember the day we met?" Samuel asked eventually. "When you stopped my horse from bolting?" "Of course I remember. I thought you were the kindest man I had ever met, and I was terrified that you would find out the truth about me and hate me for it." "I could never have hated you. Even then I knew there was something special about you, something brave and true." Samuel stopped and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Victoria, I want you to know that marrying you was the best decision I ever made. You have given me a life beyond anything I imagined. You have made me happier than I ever thought possible." "You did the same for me," Victoria said, her voice thick with emotion. "You saw me when I was convinced I was invisible. You loved me when I was certain I was unlovable. You gave me a home and a family and a future. You gave me back my life, Samuel." "Then I think we are even," Samuel said with a smile. He pulled her into his arms, and they stood together under the blooming apple trees, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the wreckage of their pasts. Victoria rested her head against Samuel's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. She thought about all the years they had shared, all the moments both monumental and mundane that had woven their lives together. She thought about the children they had raised, the legacy they were building, the love that had sustained them through everything. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that she had finally washed away the past. Not because it had never happened, but because she had learned to carry it without letting it crush her. Not because Samuel had erased her history, but because he had shown her that her worth was not determined by her worst moments, but by her capacity to survive, to love, to build something good from the ashes of tragedy. The stars began to appear overhead, one by one, as the last light faded from the western sky. In the house behind them, they could hear their children laughing over some shared joke, the sounds of home and family and belonging. Victoria breathed in the scent of apple blossoms and earth, felt Samuel's arms strong and steady around her, and knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Years later, when Victoria was old and her children had children of their own, she would tell her granddaughter about the day she met Samuel Porter, about how he had seen past her shame and fear to the woman underneath. She would talk about the importance of second chances, about the power of unconditional love, about the courage it took to believe that you deserved happiness even when the world told you otherwise. And she would say, in a voice still strong despite her years, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone love you, scars and all. That sometimes the greatest gift you can give is to see another person's worth when they cannot see it themselves. That sometimes redemption comes not from erasing the past, but from refusing to let it define the future. But that was still to come. For now, on this spring evening in 1895, Victoria and Samuel Porter stood together in their orchard, grateful for the life they had built and the love that had made it possible. The past was behind them, washed clean by time and forgiveness and the determined work of two hearts committed to choosing each other, day after day, year after year. And that, Victoria thought, as Samuel pressed a kiss to her forehead, was more than enough. It was everything.